wind out here did not feel like air. It felt like a rough hand scraping sand across the world, like it was trying to wipe every living thing away. Sarah Leighton kept walking anyway, one slow step after another, because stopping meant dying. Her lips were split and bleeding. Her throat burned with every breath. Above her, the sun hung in the sky like a hard white coin that refused to move. Below her, the land was cracked and broken, dry as old clay left too long in the fire. In her right hand, she carried a heavy black cast-iron skillet. It pulled at her arm like an anchor, but she did not let it go. In her left hand, she held a small deerskin pouch tight against her chest, as if it held her heart. The skillet was for survival. The pouch was for living. Hunger was no longer sharp. It was cold and empty, a hollow space inside her that never filled. It slowed her thoughts and made the horizon look like a lie. Still, she walked. As long as she had the skillet and the pouch, she had a reason to keep moving. Near sundown, she reached a place called Redemption. The name hung on a broken wooden sign that swung from one rusty hinge, groaning each time the wind pushed it. The town looked dead. Buildings leaned at odd angles, their windows empty like faces with no eyes. There was a saloon, a general store, and a blacksmith shop, all silent and hollow. The wide dirt street showed no fresh tracks, no promise that anyone was near. Sarah did not come for people. She came for water. In the center of town stood a wooden gallows, dark against the sky like a finger pointing upward. Beside it was the town well. The rope was frayed and the bucket long gone. Sarah tied her own cord to a small tin pot and lowered it carefully. When she pulled it back up, there were only a few inches of cloudy water inside. It tasted of metal and old dirt. She drank anyway, because life was life. She gathered scraps of dry wood from a fallen porch. The pieces snapped easily in her hands, brittle as old bones. She stacked them carefully and struck a match, one of only 7 she had left. She cupped the flame with both hands, shielding it from the wind until the fire caught. Thin gray smoke rose into the evening like a fragile prayer. Sarah set her skillet over the flames and opened the deerskin pouch. The smell that drifted out was not just spice, it was memory. It was her mother's kitchen, warm and safe, a place where hunger never ruled. Inside the pouch were cumin, dried oregano, smoked chili powder, and one precious bay leaf. Her mother used to say food was more than fuel. Food was comfort. Food was love. With the right care, even almost nothing could feel like home. She poured a handful of hard pinto beans into the skillet with a splash of water. They hissed against the hot iron. She added salt, a pinch of cumin, and a touch of chili, stirring slowly with a worn wooden spoon. The smell spread into the empty town, and for a moment, Redemption felt alive. She ate in small bites, forcing herself to slow down. The food did not fill her, but it quieted the ache enough that her hands stopped shaking. When she finished, she scrubbed the skillet with sand until it was clean. That was when a shadow fell across her fire. Sarah looked up fast, her fingers closing tight around the skillet handle, ready to swing. An old man stood there. His hat was pulled low, his face lined deep like the land itself. His clothes were dusty and worn. His hands were open and empty. He did not rush toward her. He simply stood and breathed in the air. "That's a smell I ain't smelled in this town for 20 years, he said. Sarah said nothing. Out here, trust could kill you. The old man took one slow step closer, careful, like he knew fear lived in her bones. "That ain't just beans," he said. "That's a kitchen. There's a difference." His eyes dropped to the pouch in her hand, then lifted back to her face. They were tired eyes but clear. Not cruel, just worn thin. "Name's Don Silvano," he said, passing through. "Thought I'd rest where the ghosts are, too tired to holler." He nodded toward the skillet. "I can pay if you got a spoonful left." Sarah studied him. She saw sadness there, but also something honest. Slowly, she scraped the last of the beans onto her tin plate and held it out. "Keep your payment," she said, her voice rough. "Food's meant to be shared." Don Silvano accepted the plate and ate slowly, like every bite mattered. When he finished, he stared at the empty tin as if it was something sacred. "My wife cooked like that," he said quietly, "made a man feel like he belonged somewhere." He looked at Sarah again, really looked this time. "A woman who cooks like that don't belong in a place where things only end," he said. "You're more like beginnings." Sarah let out a short, bitter laugh. "Beginnings are long past," she said. "I'm just looking for an ending that's warm." Don Silvano shook his head. "World's hard, yes, but skill matters. And I know a place that might see that." Sarah tightened her grip on the pouch as the fire burned low. She listened, because listening cost nothing. "There's a ranch north of here," he said. "Rancho Aledo, biggest one left. Owned by a man named Ignacio Ramirez." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it made her stomach turn. "Most feared rancher in this territory," Don Silvano continued. "Hard man, fair man. He's got mouths to feed." Sarah looked around the empty town, the gallows, the dust, the silence that felt like a grave. This was an ending if she stayed. She looked down at her skillet, then at her spice pouch. They were all she had. They were who she was. "Where is it?" she asked. Don Silvano pointed into the dark. 2 days north. I'm heading that way myself." "I can show you the road." Sarah stared into the dying fire. Something stirred inside her, not hope, but something heavier and stronger. Purpose. She nodded once. "All right," she said. "Lead the way." Sarah reached the ranch late in the afternoon, 2 days after Don Silvano left her at a fork in the road. The land had changed little by little as she walked. The wild desert softened into fences and straight lines, like someone had pressed a ruler down and claimed the earth. Thin wire ran beside the road for miles, humming low in the wind. It felt like a warning. This was owned land. This was not a place meant for lost people. Then she saw it. Rancho Aledo sat in a shallow valley, guarded by tall elm trees that threw long shadows across the dust. The buildings were solid, built from adobe and dark timber, not like the broken shells back in Redemption. A wide main house stood watch over everything, its porch high and still. There were bunkhouses, corrals filled with horses, a barn and a blacksmith forge breathing out thin smoke. The place looked strong. It looked like power. Sarah stopped at the iron gate. It was heavy and black, tipped with sharp points. Above it stood a wooden arch carved deep with the ranch name. The gate was closed. Inside, men moved with quiet purpose. Outside, there was only dust and Sarah's thin shadow. She waited. A rider finally came, a young ranch hand on a restless horse. He looked down at her like she was something the wind had blown in by mistake. He asked what she wanted. Sarah told him she was there to see Mr. Burrell, Ramirez. The young man almost laughed. He said the boss did not see drifters. Sarah told him she was not a drifter. She was a cook. His eyes dropped to the skillet in her hand, then to the pouch pressed to her chest. He did not look convinced, but he hesitated. He told her to wait and rode off toward the main house. Time stretched thin under the sun. Sarah felt eyes on her from the shade. Men watched from doorways and corrals. She did not move. She did not touch the gate. She waited because this was her last road. The door of the main house opened. A man stepped out onto the porch. The ranch grew quiet as if it knew him. Work slowed. Voices died. Even the horses settled. He walked with slow control, like a man who never hurried because he never had to. This was Ignacio Ramirez. He was tall and broad, dressed plain, no shine, no silver. His authority did not hang from his belt. It lived in his bones. His face was hard, shaped by years, not worn down by them. His eyes were cold and sharp, the color of a storm that had not yet broken. He stopped a few steps from the gate and looked at Sarah. Not with anger, not with kindness. He looked at her like a thing being measured. His eyes moved over her torn dress, her worn boots, the dirt on her skin, the skillet, the pouch. "We give nothing away here," he said. The words hit her hard. Fear rose in her chest. old and familiar. She felt him turn away, already finished with her. She could not let that happen. She thought of her mother's hands. She thought of the smell that lived in that pouch. "I'm not asking for a gift," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I know I'm not worth much, but I can cook." Ignacio stopped. His eyes settled on her for the first time. He looked at the skillet, at the pouch, back to her face. Silence stretched long enough to hurt. Finally, he nodded once. "Show her the cookhouse," he said to the young ranch hand. "The men eat when the sun touches the western ridge. 10 of them. Cook for them." Then he turned and walked away. The gate opened just wide enough for her to pass. It closed behind her with a heavy sound that settled in her stomach. She was inside now, but it did not feel safe. It felt like a test. The cookhouse was long and low, built for work, not comfort. A great iron stove sat cold against one wall. Shelves held sacks and tins. The air smelled of old grease and smoke. Sarah set her skillet down and stood still for a moment. Then she moved. She cleaned the stove and built a fire. She opened the pantry and saw what the ranch survived on: beans, flour, potatoes, onions, salted beef, lard, nothing fresh, nothing kind. But Sarah did not see limits. She saw tools. She chose stew, something heavy, something that could turn hunger quiet. She worked fast and steady. Beef browned in hot fat, onions softened. Potatoes were cut rough and honest. Then she opened her pouch. Cumin, chili, oregano. The smell changed the room. It made the cookhouse breathe. The stew simmered as the sun fell. She baked biscuits with quick hands and a light touch. When the ridge outside turned gold, the door opened. 10 men entered. Dusty, tired, silent. Their eyes went to the pot, the heat, the smell. Then to her. She lifted the lid and steam rolled out thick and rich. She served without a word. They ate in silence. Not angry silence, focused silence. Plates emptied. One man closed his eyes after a bite. Another went back for more. Then Ignacio Ramirez came in. He served himself and sat at the head of the table. He ate slow. When he finished, his plate was clean. He set his spoon down. "Who have you cooked for before?" he asked. "My mother," Sarah said, "and myself." He nodded once. "You stay." She was given a small room with a cot and a blanket. That night she slept with the smell of stew still on her clothes and knew where she would be when the sun rose. Days settled into rhythm. She cooked. The men ate. No praise, no cruelty, just work. Then one morning she found a sprig of wild oregano on the step. It was fresh, placed with care. She noticed the man who left it. His name was Julian. He worked with the horses. He did not speak. His silence wrapped around him like a second skin. The gifts continued. Wild onions, mushrooms, pin nuts. Sarah used them gently. Meals grew warmer. Plates came back cleaner. One afternoon, she cleaned a deep cut on Julian's hand. He did not pull away. When she finished, he nodded once. Something settled between them. Peace held for a while. Then a woman dressed in black arrived. She moved through the cookhouse like judgment. She spoke with sharp words and cold eyes. She said Sarah did not belong. Sarah cooked anyway. She used a pinch of cinnamon, a hint of clove, dried orange peel. The smell stopped the woman cold. "That is my recipe," she whispered. Grief cracked through her anger. Then she fled. After that, the ranch felt different. Weeks later, a merchant arrived with a package from Don Silvano. Inside was her mother's writing, a recipe, love pressed into paper. Sarah cooked tamales. The ranch changed that night, and before the warmth could fully settle, the scream of a burning stable tore the dark open. The scream ripped through the night like a blade. It was not a human sound. It was the raw panic of a horse trapped by fire. Sarah was awake and moving before her mind caught up. She ran outside barefoot, the cold dirt biting her skin, and saw the stable burning. Flames clawed through the roof. Smoke rolled thick and black, swallowing the stars. Men poured from the bunkhouses half-dressed, shouting, frozen by the size of it. Horses screamed inside, wild and desperate. The fire snapped and roared like it was alive. On the porch of the main house stood Ignacio Ramirez. He was already dressed. He did not move. Firelight painted his face orange and red, and Sarah saw something terrible there. Not fear, not anger, memory. He was not seeing this fire. He was seeing another one. The men looked to him. No orders came. Sarah's chest went cold. She knew that stillness. She knew what freezing meant. It meant death. "The horses!" she shouted. Her voice cut through the noise, sharp and clear. "We get the horses out." Heads turned. Men stared at her like they did not know who she was. She pointed. "You," she said to Leo, "get an axe. Break the far corral fence. Give them somewhere to run." She pointed again. "The rest of you, with me." We opened those doors. Her certainty gave the men something to hold. They ran. The stable doors burned hot, but shoulders slammed into them again and again until the bar cracked. The doors burst open and heat blasted out. Smoke clawed at lungs and eyes. Sarah tore cloth into strips and tied them over the horse's eyes, speaking low and steady, the same way she spoke to simmering pots and shaking hands. One by one, the horses broke free, bolting into the yard, then racing toward the open dark beyond the broken fence. Inside the smoke, Julian fought with Ignacio's black stallion. The horse reared and screamed. Then the roof groaned. A burning beam split loose and fell. Sarah saw it just in time to scream his name. The beam struck hard. Julian went down, his leg bent wrong, pain twisting his face. Men dragged him clear as the roof collapsed in a roar of sparks and flame. The stallion burst free and ran. Sarah did not stop. She formed a bucket line. She shouted orders until her throat burned raw. They fought the fire until the wind shifted near dawn and gave them a chance to win. When the sun rose, the stable was a black skeleton. Smoke drifted low. The ranch still stood. The men still breathed. The horses were alive. Sarah stood in the yard. Soot streaked across her face, her dress torn, her body shaking with exhaustion. Julian lay by the trough, his legs splinted, pain written deep, but his eyes were on her. He gave a small, grateful smile. On the porch, Ignacio still stood where he had frozen, but his eyes were different now, clear, fixed on Sarah. That morning, Sarah lit the cookhouse fire again. She made a simple soup: bacon, onions, potatoes, carrots. She carried the first bowl to Julian and helped him sit. He held it close, breathing in the steam like medicine. Later, Ignacio came into the cookhouse. He stopped in front of her, his voice low and rough. "The ranch would have been lost," he said. "You saved it." Then, like it cost him something deep, he added, "Thank you." Days passed. The ranch rebuilt itself board by board. Men spoke to Sarah now. Short words, quiet thanks. Julian healed slow and sat near the cookhouse, watching life move. One day he brought her a tin can with a living chili plant inside. He held it out like an offering. Sarah knelt by the south wall and dug into the hard dirt. She planted it. Then she pressed her own saved seeds into the soil. Roots from the past, roots from the present, a future growing in the same ground. One evening, Ignacio placed a folded paper on the table. It was a deed. It gave her ownership of the cookhouse and the land beneath it. Half the provisioning business was hers. Sarah could barely speak. Why? Ignacio's face stayed hard, but his eyes held a truth long buried. "My first ranch burned 15 years ago," he said. "My wife and my son were inside. I was the only one who got out." He swallowed once. "Last night, I watched it happen again, and I froze." He looked at her. "You did not." "I do not need a cook," he said. "I need a partner." Sarah thought of the desert, the skillet, the pouch, the gate closing behind her. She looked at the small green leaves pushing through dead soil. "Yes," she said. The word settled like a stone set deep and solid. The next morning, Julian hung a carved sign above the cookhouse door. The letters were strong and sure. Above them, a single flame. Sarah touched the wood. She had crossed the desert with almost nothing.